powerful agenda. I want to ask you because you have been successful today in pushing your goals with the G7 as you hope to be. What the mood is like at this gathering? Were you able to meet over the last day or two with Prime Minister Johnson or other G7 leaders? What's your sense of how this gathering is going?
Last saw Prime Minister Johnson a few weeks ago. We visited a school together in Durham and had a very delightful morning talking to not only local children, but we were hooked up with a classroom in Kenya where President Kenyatta was, and we were able to talk back and forth with the children there. One of the children asked Prime Minister Johnson what his favourite subject was at school, and he said studying Latin and the classics. So I think that caused a bit of bemusement amongst children, both in Durham and in Kenya. But we were able, when we were together, for me to get a very clear sense that Prime Minister Johnson was absolutely focused on ensuring that despite the multiple challenges on the table at this G7, that there would be a focus on girls' education. And of course, we're grateful for that. I mean, this meeting is at an extraordinary time where many of our nations are looking for the days beyond the pandemic. We've got access to vaccines. Communities are starting to get to the stage that they can open up. But we know right around the world that that is not the circumstances in which so many are living. For many countries, the height of the pandemic, illness and disease is still with them. So I can understand that each of the leaders at the G7 has felt very strongly the importance of discussing and collaborating to get vaccines out there and to get economic growth, as well as to deal with some of the longer term issues that, education and putting money into education now makes a difference to. And then, of course, the challenge of climate change is there very clearly, and a number of groups have gathered in Cornwall today, protest groups of various dimensions, but a number of them have been very clearly putting the climate change agenda to leaders.
One of the interesting aspects of this year's G7 is that Prime Minister Johnson invited Australia as a guest, an observer, as it were, along with India and South Korea. Do you think that's a good idea? And I'm wondering whether you think the G7 really needs to be expanded. We already have a G20, but do we need something that's intermediate in a sense that would bring Australia in as a regular member?
Well, I guess from the perspective of my nation, irrespective of who's in government, we've always taken the view that if there's a gathering of leaders where we can make a difference and put a perspective about what ought to be happening globally, then we should be there. And I'm sure Prime Minister Morrison is very pleased to have been invited to the G7. I, believe that each of these bodies can have their role. The G20 was pivotal to the economic coordination that was needed in the face of the global financial crisis, the huge economic crash of 2008. And so, I would want to see the world continuing to invest in the G20. But it does seem to me to make sense when the G7 meets to not only have the nations who have historically been there, but from time to time to include others.